Hey, welcome along. I was thinking about President Trump's speech in Warsaw the other day, which had the immense benefit of driving the entire American media nuts in their reaction to it. As enjoyable as that was, it actually distracted from the content of the speech. And one of the things that was interesting to me was that Trump's defense of Western civilization was predicated on what he called faith and family. And that's true-ish in Poland, which has, by the standards of post-Christian Christendom, quite a high rate of church attendance if you go to Warsaw on a Sunday morning. But it gets dramatically less true as you move west in terms of faith. And then I started thinking about family. And I would like to talk a little bit more about that today, because Trump didn't mention this explicitly. He was talking about Western will in the face of its enemies. But in the famous observation by the historian Arnold Toynbee, great civilizations don't die through murder, but through suicide. And the suicide in Western Europe is a demographic suicide. You may have seen the other day that Ireland has a new Taoiseach. Taoiseach is Gaelic for Prime Minister. It's a fun word to say, lovely word to say, Taoiseach. And he's Leo Varadkar. He's the first Taoiseach that the Irish state has had, who is, if you're thinking, Leo Varadkar, that doesn't, well, whatever happened to Seamus O'Flaherty? That doesn't sound terribly Irish. Well, Varadkar is an Indian name. He's the first Taoiseach in the history of the Irish state of Indian descent. He is also the first gay Taoiseach in the history of the Irish state. And he is the youngest Taoiseach in the history of the Irish state. And all this was dwelt upon in some detail by the Irish papers when Mr. Varadkar became Taoiseach in the Dáil. That's another fun word in Irish Parliament. And the fact that he was gay, the fact that he was Indian, the fact that he was young, was all dwelt on by the Irish papers at some length. What was not dwelt on was the most interesting element to me, which that he is childless. And he joins a long list of childless prime ministers throughout Europe, to the point where 2/3 of the European Union now live under childless rulers. The leaders of Europe's biggest economies, and all the European members of the G7, in fact, are childless. That's Britain's Theresa May, that's Germany's Angela Merkel, that's Monsieur Macron in France, and a fellow called Paolo Gentiloni in Italy. So all four European leaders of the G7 are childless. That would have been not just statistically improbable, but all but impossible for most of human history. Whatever Europolitics is about, it's not, in the words of the famous Bill Clinton cliche, about the future of all our children. Won't somebody think of the children, as they like to say in The Simpsons? No, nobody needs to in the European political class. Of the 6 founding members of the European Union, that's France, Germany, Italy, Belgium, Netherlands, Luxembourg, 5 are led by childless prime ministers. So they have no need of daycare at the Euro summits. Joining Frau Merkel and Signor Gentiloni and Monsieur Macron are the Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte and the Luxembourger Xavier Bettel. Mark Rutte is single and childless. Xavier Bettel of Luxembourg is married, but he is gay, and alas, for the moment, he and his husband have not been blessed by a visit from the stork. And it would have been a clean sweep of all 6 of the European Union's founding members, a non-procreative sextet, had not Charles Michel in Belgium succeeded another gay prime minister, Elio Di Rupo. And Monsieur Di Rupo was also unblessed by any visit from the Eurostork, but he's been succeeded by Monsieur Michel, who has managed to sire a brace of moppets. So that's 2 kids between 6 prime ministers. And I could go on. Switzerland's Simonetta Sommaruga, Sweden's Stefan Löfven, Scotland's Nicola Sturgeon. Childless leaders across the Euromap. And that political class is the demographics of Western Europe writ small. The Eurocrats have become a continental version of the Shakers in my part of northern New England, who you may recall they were apparently forbidden to breed and they could only increase their numbers through conversion. So the European political class is barren, and in a sense, it exemplifies the barrenness of the general population, which is true in Western Europe and elsewhere in the developed world, such as Japan, where they now sell as many adult diapers as baby diapers, and where the number of 20 to 29-year-olds in Japan has crashed from 18 million to 12 million just in the last 17 years, since the year 2000. In the year 2000, there were 18 million 20-somethings in Japan. There are now 12 million. The Japanese have stopped having babies. Large numbers of them have stopped having romantic relationships entirely. It's not just that they're not interested in getting pregnant, they're not interested in getting to first base. A survey 3 years ago of men aged 16 to 24 said, quote, they were not interested in or despise sexual contact. And for women, it was 45%. A third of Japanese adults under 30 have never dated anyone ever. And that's why you read these slightly wacky stories out of Japan every so often about new developments in robots, because they've got an old population. When you've got an old population, in the way our societies are now organized, you need young people to take care of them. And if you don't have young people, you have robots. And so when you're lying in the hospital bed in the last few years of your life and they're having to turn you down to give you a bed bath and roll you over in the morning, on the whole, you'd rather have a human nurse than a robot nurse, because the robot nurses have cold metallic hands, and that's not the best way to wake up in the morning with some great iron clamp turning you over like one of those machines you see in the arcade where you can make the metal claw go down and get the fluffy teddy bear if you keep dropping enough quarters in the machine. So they're working on developing new kinds of ever more human robots. So they'll be like manga-like robots with like big girly faces and soft plastic hands that will turn you over as you're lying there in bed. Because the Japanese have no immigrants, and they don't want any immigrants. And so they're going to, however it works out, whether they're the first to the post-human future or whether they actually go out of business as a nation entirely, they're going to die or live as Japan for the Japanese. In Europe, it's a slightly different situation, but the same deathbed demographics. Now, everyone talks about Greece as a debt problem. And yes, it is a debt problem. They're broke. They spend more than they earn. They have massive levels of government welfare. It's terribly corrupt. And they have money problems, no doubt. But they also have a demographic problem. 100 grandparents have 42 grandchildren. That's an upside-down family tree. You see films like My Big Fat Greek Wedding, where the uptight wasp from the small waspy family falls in love with a big, fecund Greek girl from a big, fecund Greek family where there are zillions of siblings and cousins. That's myth. It's like most Hollywood movies. They're using the cliches that are already out of date by the time they get around to making movies about them. That's not how it goes in Greece. In the real Greece, 100 grandparents have 42 grandchildren. Upside-down family tree. And that's an issue for the debt. Is it likely that the debts run up by 100 people are going to be paid off by 42 people? We all know the answer to that. It's also true for every other aspect of life. If you're a property developer, And if you build a shopping mall with a parking lot for 100 cars, and there's only 42 cars in it. If you build an office building for 100 occupants, but only 42 of the offices are taken. Demography underlies everything. England and Wales, 1 in 9 women born in 1940 were childless at the age of 45, if you were born in 1940. If you were born in 1967, 1 in 5 women were childless by the age of 45. A quarter of British women born in the 70s are childless. In Germany, 30% of all women are childless. 40% of university-educated women are childless, including Angela Merkel. And at this point, the Europeans decided to import people to be the children that they couldn't be bothered having themselves. Because the short story of the welfare state is that it's a transfer from the young to the old. In Europe, you get to retire relatively early, 60, 55, 50 in some cases in Greece and France and places. And you get to spend a third of your life as a kind of long holiday weekend at somebody else's expense. And the somebody else they stick the tab to is the young. So if you don't have young people, you can't have retirement. You can't have 3 decades of just playing shuffleboard at the old folks' home or lying nude and ever wrinklier on the beach at Saint-Tropez. It's not going to work. The system depends on young people to pay for the old people to lie around doing nothing for the last 20 or 30 years of their life. So they imported a mostly Muslim population to be the children they couldn't be bothered having themselves. And they gave no thought to the demographic implications of that. Now, Muslim leaders do, even quite relatively simple-minded ones, like the late and ill-fated Colonel Gaddafi, understood the significance of Muslim immigration to Europe. So today does the wannabe caliph, President Erdogan in Turkey, who has urged Muslims in Europe to have at least 5 children, because we know how that's going to work out. When 30% of German women are childless, and you have a large incoming Muslim population that has 5 children, we know how that's going to work out. They don't have to have actually 5 children. People think this is a slow process because they think even if the Muslim population of Europe increases, it only increases, it goes, like in France, it's officially about 10%. Although all these statistics are very malleable and fudged, and the government goes to quite a lot of trouble not to actually keep accurate statistics on this, or at any rate not to publish them. But if you have 90% of the population who are post-Christian Euro-secularists, and then you have 10% who are Muslims, that sounds like a tiny, teensy-weensy minority. Why would that change? In Northern Ireland, where roughly 2/3 are Protestant and 1/3 are Catholic, and they were terrified for years, the Protestants, that the Catholics were going to outbreed them. And in fact, it hasn't really happened. There's been some modest kind of adjustment in the statistics, but it's actually been surprisingly stable now for 95 years. It hasn't actually... the Protestants can hold their majority in Ulster for actually quite a long time without having to worry too much about demographics. But if you have those European differential rates of birth, things change very quickly. The 90% post-Christian Euro-secularists who have 1.3 children per couple, and the 10% Muslims who have 3.5 children per couple, which is estimated to be the European Muslim average. The 90% and the 10% will have the same number of grandchildren. That's to say, the 90 grandparents will have 38 grandchildren, and the 10 Muslim grandparents will have 32 children. So they catch up in 2 generations. It happens very fast. And the catching up is well underway. The most popular baby boy's name in England and Wales is Mohammed. And again, they fudge the statistics because they tell you that, Mohammed with an O and Mohammed with a U and Mohammed with an E at the end and Mohammed with an A at the end, they're all different kinds. So there's 14 different spellings. But the total number of Mohammeds born in England and Wales in 2015 was 7,361. The number 2, the runner-up, was Oliver, 6,941. That's one for you Lionel Bart fans from Charles Dickens, Oliver. What could be more Cockney and enjoyable than the name Oliver? But in fact, he's the runner-up, and it's Mohammed, who's the number 1 boy. Brussels, 25% Muslim. The capital city of the European Union, 25% Muslim. Antwerp, Belgium. A majority of the elementary school pupils in Antwerp are Muslim, which means Antwerp, the great Belgian port city, not far from where my dear old mum grew up, is going to be Muslim, because the population in your grade school is going to be the grown-up population in 15 years' time. That's true everywhere. A majority of the grade school pupils in Arizona are Hispanic, so Arizona's future is as an Hispanic state. You can't buck demography. It's not a prediction. Nobody's predicting anything. We're talking about who are the kids in the grade school right now, which means they're going to be the guys entering the workforce in 15 years' time. That's not a prediction. We're not looking at trends. We're looking at the actual warm bodies sitting in the elementary school classes now. But let's predict it out a bit, just a little bit further. The Vienna Institute of Demography, which is one of the few institutions in Europe which actually tracks this subject, says that by mid-century, a majority of Austrians under 15 will be Muslim. This is a country that not so long ago was 90% Catholic. But not so long ago is another country. If all you know about Austria comes from The Sound of Music, Salzburg, 1938, singing nuns, Julie Andrews, how do you solve a problem like Maria? Salzburg, 2038, how do you solve a problem like Sharia? That's Austria a generation from now. This is extraordinary. This is the biggest story of our time, and yet hardly anyone ever writes about it. I wrote a book about it a decade ago. Douglas Murray has written a book called The Strange Death of Europe. You may have seen my interview with him. But we're a handful of figures. The UN Statistics Division crunches all the numbers and says this is one of the biggest demographic movements, demographic transformations in history. And it's about to accelerate. In Africa, which is just a short, as we see and every day on the news, just a short boat ride across the Mediterranean from Italy and Greece and Spain, a continent that can't support 1 billion people is expected to increase to 4 billion by the end of this century. So the people who built the modern world are going out of business voluntarily. And that has a question for the future of humanity. If you think that Italy is like Gate 38 at O'Hare Airport, that it's no more than a collection of the people who happen to be standing in it at any one time, then none of this matters. If you think that Italy's contribution to the world, or France's, or Germany's, derives from the character of the people, then this rapid, unprecedented demographic substitution and transformation has consequences for the world. It has immediate consequences, too, for social tranquility in those countries. Welfare, as I indicated earlier, on which most of these countries are based, depends on a certain amount of social solidarity. That you are willing to pay for the old in their old folks' home because, in a literal sense, they're your parents and grandparents, and you accept that responsibility of higher taxes to pay for people to enjoy the 30 years retirement because they are actually your own parents and grandparents. Whether Ahmed and Mohammed will be willing to pay extraordinarily higher taxes for Pierre and Fritz to enjoy 30-year retirements, I think is far more doubtful. And so I think there are turbulent times ahead for most parts of Europe in the years ahead. Sweden, just a couple of years, took in so many allegedly young men that it now has a worse sex imbalance between boys and girls among its 16 and 17-year-old cohort than China has after 40 years of its one-child policy, where all the girls got aborted and they were left with all these boys. Generally, if you have a large surplus population of young men for whom there are no chicks, you have a lot of guys who can't get any action. That's not a recipe for social tranquility either. As I said, it's the biggest story of our time. It underpins everything President Trump was saying in Warsaw about faith and family. Post-Christian Europe doesn't really have any faith, and it doesn't have any families either. And they are fading into the past. They have essentially broken the compact of human societies. Functioning societies are an alliance between the present and the past and the future. You honor the traditions of your ancestors and you pass them on to your descendants. That is the great stream of humanity. And as Tom Wolfe wrote a few years ago, Europe has essentially climbed out of that stream. It has broken that compact. It has created a perfect Euro utopia for the moment. And it's living in the present tense. It's trying to hold the moment like Goethe's Faust. But it can't succeed in doing it. And the people who are presently governed by Leo Varadkar and Theresa May and Angela Merkel and Emmanuel Macron and the other childless leaders of the European political class know that this utopia is only a moment, and that Europe will be inherited by an entirely different group of people. Now, you might disagree with me, and if so, have at it. Tell me that I'm wrong. Tell me where I'm going wrong. But don't do what the media do, which is react to the biggest story of our time, the demographic extinguishing of the people who built the modern world, and they don't even write about it. If there are two sides to this story, then let's hear the other side. But right now, it's the biggest story of our time, and no one is telling it. We'll see you next time.